I mentioned in the previous segment that the Rebbe brings that there are tzimtzumim, many tzimtzumim, for there to be the level that's called in the Maimori Chasidis Yocheles. The word Yocheles, which is associated with the idea of possibility as opposed to strength, Yecholte Lahoid and Yecholte Shalei Lahoid, and it's only one Yocheles, is nothing other than the possibility for Atzmos to do whatever he wants. But the way Yocheles is understood in the Maimorim, and the way Yocheles is exploited by our Rebbe particularly, Yocheles is an idea in Oyer. But it's an idea in Oyer that has absolutely no Metzias whatsoever. It's just Yocheles for Oyer. And it's actually called Kadmin Kakad Mosei Yisbarach, which means that in no way is there any reality to Yocheles outside of Moed, outside of Atzmos. It's simply the Yocheles of Atzmos, but at the same time, the fact that the level of Yocheles exists is considered an idea in Oyer, which the Rebbe explains will change how Oires emerge from Atzmos in Seder Ishtalshalos, because before they were Metzias of Oyer, they were in the level of Yocheles, and this somehow changes how Oyer is going to be later. And the Rebbe says in his Maimorim that in order for Yocheles to exist, there's a Ribet Tzimtzumim. I will make no attempt to explain this. I'm just going to state that the Rebbe spoke about it, and then when the Rebbe spoke about it in Tafshin Memhei in 1985, Yud Shvat, there was a big tumult, and I was a little bit too young to appreciate the debate. But the way I understand it from what people told me who are older than I am, that the Rebbe said to shut it down because nobody understood what he's talking about. So there's Tzimtzum for there to be a notion of Oyer on the very, very highest levels, on the levels which are not levels. But the first idea of Ein Sof that I want to talk about, and the notion that there is a Tzimtzum for this Ein Sof to exist, is what's called Etzem of Ein Sof. Right? You may know this from the very, very first page of the Basei Legani Tafshin Yud Aleph, where the Rebbe points out that there's 3 levels of Ein Sof, and he refers to a Maimer near the very, very end of the Samach Vav. Maybe it's Vayechi, maybe it's Shmois, where the Rebbe Rashab actually finally says clearly that there's 3 levels of Ein Sof, not just 2 levels of Ein Sof, as is indicative earlier in the Samach Vav. And the first level of Ein Sof is called Etzem of Ein Sof. The idea of Etzem of Ein Sof is very, very deep, but at the same time it's very, very simple, and I'll explain to you how. The principle of Oyer is that it's Mein HaMoyer, right? We discussed this earlier. The principle of light, of divine reflection, divine representation, is that it's Me'ein, it's the same as the source, and that its emergence from the source is automatically. The source, with a capital S, is called Helam Ha'atzmi. Helam Ha'atzmi is meant to be a philosophical definition for what Hashem is, what God is. And in my Maimorim, I saw the Rebbe has footnotes where the Rebbe writes, Keinu Aloshem B'kama Mekemis. The Rebbe is not comfortable saying that you can define God by anything, but that's the expression which my Maimorim use. The meaning of the word Helam Ha'atzmi means hidden in relationship with self. Usually, when something is hidden, it's because it's not detectable by another, or there's something blocking it from another being able to detect it. Helam Ha'atzmi means something that exists, and it's hidden, but its hiddenness is not because of its relationship to something else, or lack of relationship with something else, but that its hiddenness is about itself. That's the meaning of Helam Ha'atzmi, hidden because of self. That's how you translate the words. Or another very similar expression called Helam B'yetzem. Its hiddenness is not because of an association and a relativism, it's a hiddenness because of what it is by itself. If you wanted to say this in more avoida terms, in more feelable terms, you would say that the nature of truth is that it's sneistic, it's modest. It exists only in relationship with self. The idea of being seen by another, defining itself by its relationship with another, is considered superficial. A truth is for itself, and Kvayachal the Eibishter is also for himself. So if we accept this philosophical definition, which is brought in by Mari Chasidis, that Alakus, the Eibishter, is called Helam Ha'atzmi or Helam Be'etzem, and we further understand that godliness emerges from the source, Me'ein HaMoed, to be the same as the source, you should have to argue that as the source is Helam, so is the light. Just as the source, with a capital S, is called Helam Ha'atzmi, Helam Be'etzem, the nature of the existence of God is that he has nothing to do with anything but self. So he's hidden even though he's not hiding. He's not seen even though he's not being blocked, but because the nature of his being, and I hate to use the word nature, is a modesty, is an existence in relationship with self. So godliness, which comes from that source, should be the same thing. A perfect it is as the source is tzanua, as the source exists only in relationship with itself, so should the Ein Sof be. And that's the way we understand this level of etzem of Ein Sof, godliness as exists in relationship with self. Etzem of Ein Sof is not Hashem, it's not Helam Ha'atzmi. Etzem of Ein Sof is a level of oir. It's godliness, it's not God. But the expression which is found in the Maimorim is that it's Hamshacha v'lo Gilui. Although it emerges from the source, it's not revealing anything. In other words, as the source exists in relationship with itself, the light exists in relationship with itself, but, quote, at least, end quote, it's light. And this, arguably, is the perfect model of Ein Sof. The perfect concept of godliness, the most comprehensive idea of Ein HaMoed is as the source is hidden in relationship with self, the light which emerges from that source is also hidden in relationship with self. And obviously there's an incredible tzimtzum between how Elakus is in a state of Helam Ha'atzmi, how Elakah is in a state of Helam Ha'atzmi, and how Elakus is in a state of Helam Be'etzem, how Ein Sof, how godliness is in a hidden state. Basically the difference is Elakah, when you're talking about Hashem as being Helam Be'etzem, because he's not a Metzias. And Ein Sof, which is hidden in relationship with self, is a Metzias. It's light, it's a Metzias, as a form. And theoretically, the meaning of the word Metzias means it can be identified in relationship with something else, except that it isn't. So the Maimonim would argue, for Etzem of Ein Sof to emerge from what we call Atzmos, there has to be a very, very huge tzimtzum, an incredible tzimtzum. Because the source is Motzei built-in Metzias, his existence is non-existential, and the Oyer, which we're calling the face of Elakus, is a Metzias Nimtza, even though it's in a state of Helam Be'etzem. Now the right thing for me to do is to explain this Tzimtzum. But I can't explain it because I don't know it, I don't understand it. I think that in the Maimer Katainti Reish Ein Ches that I mentioned before on page Tzadik Tes, and in the Memorim of the Rebbe Katainti Tafshin Yud Zayin on page Samach Beis, there may be some kind of insight in what's the nature of this Tzimtzum, but we're going to leave this alone. We're just going to move on. We're just going to simply state that the idea that Elakus, that godliness exists in a state of Etzem, but it's a Metzias of Oid, is an incredible tzimtzum from the way it's included in Moed. It's the biggest tzimtzum. But there's a second level of Ein Sof. And the second level of Ein Sof, again, going back to the first page of the Basar Lagani, Tafshin Yud Aleph, is called Gilui La'atzmei B'Shvil Atzmei. It's revealed to self because of self. This is the Mokar of Seviv Kalam. This is the source of Seviv Kalam. This second level is also Lifnei HaTzimtzum, but it's very, very, very different than the first level. Significantly, very substantially different than the first level. The difference between the first level and the second level is that the first level is in a state of Helam. It's not a Helam, but we don't see it, it's a Helam Be'etzem. It's the nature of its existence is that it's not detectable, that it exists only in relationship with self. The middle level is Gilui. How godliness that first exists in a state of Helam is tzimtzum, so there should be in a state of gilui. The meaning of the word gilui is that it will touch another, and the other will detect it and experience it. The other will be affected by that experience, and the light will be affected by the fact that the other experiences it. Meaning to say that the other will experience the light, and it will know the light, not because it becomes one with the light, but it'll know the light as another. And so long as the Ein Sof is known by another as another, this is called gilui. This is called revelation. This is called a change. It's a meeting of two things where each one is affected by the meeting. And this is the second level of Ein Sof, where the Ein Sof is in a state of gilui, where the godless is in a state of revelation. And here again, and this is the source of the Ein Sof HaSev of Kalam. Now here again, there is a huge tzimtzum for godliness to go from being in a state of helam, be'etzem, to being in a state of gilui, even if the gilui is only liatzmei, but the very notion of revelation, that it has a relationship with another, is an incredible tzimtzum that allows for the oil to have changed from the way it's in a state of helam be'etzem to the way it's in a state of gilui. And here I'm going to offer some meaning, a little bit of insight into what the tzimtzum is. There's a rule about tzimtzum that says that every tzimtzum is two tzimtzums. When something is reduced, when a light is reduced from the way it is in the higher level to the way it is in the lower level, then of course there's a presumption that nothing is created kan nimtza kan hoya. Everything goes back to the beginning. So if a light comes on from a lower level to a higher level before it descended from the higher level to the lower level, it existed in the higher level. But in order for it to descend from that higher level to lower, two things have to take place. Number one, the pneumius, the inner dimension of that oil, has to be removed. And number two, as a consequence of the inner dimension of that oil being removed, the chitzonius, the secondary dimension of that oil, could manifest, could emerge. And in this case, this is how you would understand it. Ein Sof, the first level of godliness, Ein Sof, which is in a state of helam be'etzem, is defined by its bittul. It's very close to the source. It feels the source, and as the source is hidden, so is the light hidden. The tzimtzum that takes place between this first level of Ein Sof and the second level of Ein Sof is that the bittul has to be removed, or the bittul has to be diminished. The degree of bittul that the oid has to the source, that on the first level makes it dark, like the source itself is dark, has to be removed. And when the bittul of the oid is diminished, so the secondary idea of the oid, which is gilui, that the idea of oid is that it's a matzias, that it exists as a form, and therefore could in theory exist in relationship with others, emerges. And that's how the second level is separated from the first level. The bittul is removed, and the phenomenon of matzias, or gilui of the Ein Sof, emerges, and this second level of Ein Sof is called gilui, it's called revelation. Now there's a couple of things you have to understand about this revelation, because you're talking pre-tzimtzum, and pre-tzimtzum there's no real zulas. So the Maimonim explained that it's a zulas b'nei ubei, kadein kamtza. The other in the light is actually not separated from the light. It's a part of the light itself. To use fancy words, there's keich ha-bligvul and keich ha-gvul. And in Seish Lefnei HaTzimtzum, keich ha-gvul and keich ha-bligvul exist together. So when in the Ein Sof, the keich ha-bligvul, the keich ha-gvul, are separated minei ubei, a little bit within itself, that the keich ha-gvul could be considered azulas, another, compared to the keich ha-bli gvul, there can be a concept of gilui. And this is the concept, this is the idea of the second madrega of Ein Sof, that is a tzimtzum that removes the bittul and allows the idea of gilui to emerge, and the gilui has to do with the oisius or the kelim which are minei ubei. Another thing about this madrega of Ein Sof, that this is already developed from the Alter Rebbe. In other words, I don't think this is written in Kabbalah, so the Alter Rebbe is Machadesh, and this is called Sfiras Ein Kates. This is an infinite number of Sfiras. And the reason is infinite number of Sfiras, because Hashem is infinite. Hashem is infinite in every way. He's infinite in His plainness, He's infinite in His endlessness, He's infinite in His diverse possibilities. When Oyer becomes in a state of Giloi, those infinite possibilities reveal themselves. They don't necessarily reveal themselves as individual possibilities, but they reveal themselves as the manifestation of those possibilities, and it's therefore called Sfiras Ein Kates, the Madrega of Ein Sof, which is Gilui La'atzma B'Shvil La'atzma, which is the Mokar of Seviv Kalalman, there is the idea of Sfiras and Kates, because it's a reflection of what Atzmos is, but it's the way Atzmos is in a state of Gilui. And that's the second level of Ein Seif. Gilui La'atzma, which is B'Shvil La'atzma. And then the third level of Ein Seif. And the third level of Ein Seif is what we call Gilui La'atzma, which is B'Shvil Ha'elamis, which is the Mokar of Mamalek Kalalman, revelation for him, in himself, for the relation, just for the sake of the world, to source of Malach Alalman. This third level is already the beginning of worldliness. This happens through Ratzon. When Hashem wills the world to exist, there is a godliness which is going to reveal itself in the world, and that's why it's going to be in the number of 10 spheres, because it's a reflection not of what the Pshitas of Elokus is, but it's a reflection of what the world is going to be. So I'm going to interrupt right here and speak to a very important idea that I mentioned in my previous segment. And that is that the first two levels of Ein Seif that I just mentioned, the idea of Etzem of Ein Seif, and Gilui La'atzma B'Shvil La'atzma, which is the Moked of Seviv Kalalman, that Sfira St. Kates, these two levels of godliness are not about the world at all. It's as if you were to say that if God would not create the world, these levels of godliness would exist. Although they're a Gilui Ritzainus, Chas v'Shalom to say that they must exist, but the nature of their existence is that they're part of Shleimus HaAtzmos. They're part of the wholeness of godliness. The philosophy behind this would be this. God is everything, right? God is everything. Not God is everything, God is every possibility. But when you say that God is everything, God is every possibility, there's two conditions for that idea. God is everything, God is every possibility. Number one, God is everything, God is every possibility, the way all of those everything and possibility exist as non-things. Because He exists, all possibilities exist, all of everything exists, but it's existent only because of Him. The other model is that in order for Him to be whole, the idea that God is everything, and that God is every possibility, has to actually be manifest, has to be actually expressed. In other words, if God is perfect and whole, it's not only that in theory from Him could come everything, but there has to be a place and a level where from Him everything actually comes. And these two first levels of Ein Sof, Atzmas of Ein Seif and Gilui La'atzma B'Shvil La'atzma, which is the Mokar Seviv Kalalman, go into this category. These are levels of godliness that don't exist because of worldliness, but they exist outside of Etzem. In other words, they represent the idea that the perfection and wholeness of godliness is not only in theory, but in its actualization. There's the actual expression of all possibilities on the level of godliness, which is represented by the Madrega of Etzem of Ein Seif and the Madrega of Gilui of Ein Seif. And the next segment was talking about the third level of Ein Seif, Shlifnei HaTzimtzum. And when it comes to the third level of Ein Seif, Shlifnei HaTzimtzum, this is already the beginning of worldliness.